Hello, greetings to you all. Welcome to Grade 8 Tutorials. My name is Afari Ernest, and today we are going to look at inflation, and we will also look at the types of inflation, causes, and the effects of inflation on the economy. So let's begin with our topic for today. And so for the definition, when we say inflation, what does it mean? And so inflation in economics refers to a continuous increase in the general price level of goods and services in an economy over a period of time. I hope you get it. So anytime there is inflation in the system, it means there is continuous rise in prices of commodities. And so anytime the price of a commodity increases, it reduces the purchasing power of the money. Do you get it? So it means what the money can buy today cannot buy tomorrow, because the future price or the inflated price, the power it has is more than the state of that same currency as at now. I hope you get that. And so we also see the value of the money also falls, because it's the same thing as I said. What the money can buy today will not be different. Will be different from what the money can buy when there is inflation. So let's take an example, like let's say you bought a house $200,000 last year, but this year the same house cost $220,000. This means that the price of the housing has increased by 10%. If your income hasn't increased by 10%, you can afford less housing than you could last year. You get it? So that is basically inflation, because in as much as the price of goods and commodities are increasing, your income must also increase. So a situation whereby your income remains stagnant or remains same and the price of commodities are increasing, it means there is inflation. And so that is what we are going to look at. And we say inflation does not affect only one commodity. I hope you get that. So inflation affects many commodities, because one commodity can also have an effect on another commodity to cause a general inflation. So whenever we are dealing with inflation, it is not one commodity that we are talking about. I hope you get that. We are talking about the whole economy or the whole market. Okay. So measuring inflation. Today's topic, we are going to look at the theoretical aspects of the inflation, but in our next lesson, we will be looking at how to calculate inflation index and also inflation rates. But for today's topic or today's video, we are only going to look at the theoretical aspects of the inflation. That is the concepts of inflation, the causes, the types, and also the effect of inflation on the economy. Okay, and so here we are saying, before you determine the index, first of all, you must identify what your cost of the product in that particular year. And you also have to identify the cost of the product in the base year that you are talking about. Do you get it? So you first have to identify the cost of the product in the year, that is the price of the product in the year. Then you identify the base year, the year that you are going to compare with the current year, that is the base year we are talking about. And you also compare with the price in that particular, or the cost in that particular base year. Then you multiply it by 100. So that is what we are talking about. And so suppose you are comparing 2024 and 2020. Do you get it? So the price of, let's say, a mobile phone in 2020 and the price of mobile phone in 2024. Now, the price of mobile phone in 2020. So 2020 is the base year, because current year is 2024, and we are using 2020 to compare the price in 2024. So 2020 becomes the base year, and 2024 becomes the current year, or today's year. I hope you get that. Then you do your division and you multiply it by 100. That is how we measure the inflation. Now let's move on to the types of inflation. And so the types of inflation, we have demand pull and cost push, right? And so we'll be looking at demand pull when we finish, we look at cost push. And so demand pull, we say it is an increase in total demand above supply, which pulls upwards price level. I hope you get that. And when it comes to cost push, rising cost of production pushes prices of final goods upwards. So let's look at the demand pull first. And so when we talk about the demand pull, what does it mean? Let's first look at the definition of demand pull. We can define demand pull as a situation that occurs when a demand for a particular commodity exceeds the supply. I hope you get that. So if many people are demanding for a particular product and the supply is what? Let's say the supply is less. You see, the producers or the suppliers will be forced to rise the price. Do you get it? For example, we are selling pens, right? We are selling pens, and I am a supplier. I have 20 pens available, and at the moment 40 people needs what? The pens, right? And so as a producer or as a supplier, those 40 people cannot get the 20 pens from me. I hope you get it. Yes. So what I will do is I will just because the demand has increased, it means they need the thing seriously, right? So I have to increase the price of the pen so that whoever can afford will buy, because they are all in need. If you increase the price, the likelihood that you will still get 20 of them to buy it at that higher price is what? Very high. I hope you get it. And so that is the demand pull we are talking about here. And so we see rising prices caused by what? Excessive demand. Many people are demanding for the product and there is what? A few supply. And so in this case, there is going to be what? A rise in price. And you know inflation is what? A rise in price. I hope you get that. And so one type of inflation is what? This demand pull inflation. So let's take an example like you are selling a house. And there was a period when houses were, let's say, cheap. Do you get it? And so you have a lot of people who are ready to buy houses. But the houses available, they are few. There are 20 houses available. But you have 100, 200 people who are ready to buy what? The houses. I hope you get that. And so in this case, you see that those people who are ready to buy the houses are more than the houses. And so in this case, you just increase the price of the houses as a supplier. And when increasing the price will cause what? Inflation. Because you are pushing the price of that particular house up. And that is what we term as what? Inflation, because inflation is the rise in the general price of a good or a service. Right, so let's move on to the causes. So we have causes of demand pull inflation, right? And so we have increased money supply to find deficit through printing more currency without increasing output. So this is about printing currencies without increasing what? Output. And so you see, because more money is chasing the same amount of goods and what? Services in the economy. Because if there is inflation, what you have to do is you have to provide or you have to produce what? More goods, or you have to increase your output. But here lies the case that we are printing more money into the system, but we are not producing. So you see, the money supply will increase. And so if the money supply is increasing, it means a lot of people will have the money, but they will chase what? A few goods or commodities. How do you get that? So example, let's say a government prints more money to fund its deficit. And so the deficit we are talking about here is what? Let's say when the government spending is more than what? The government revenue. And we explained it earlier that when we talk about deficit is when the budget of the government, it's all the let's say the monetary value of that particular budget exceeds what the revenue the government has. So in this case, the government has to print more money. I hope you get that. So that is basically what we are talking about here. So we see as a result, business raise prices knowing that people have more money to spend. For instance, a bakery raises the price of bread from $2 to 2.5 dollars, even though the cost of ingredients hasn't changed. But it is the perception of that seller or the producer that a lot of people has money. And so that is the first point when we say increase money supply. So anytime the government prints money, just have it in mind there is money supply. Yes, to fund deficit through printing more currency without increasing output. Okay, so that is the first point. And when you come to the second point, that is high population growth without increased productivity. And so when the population of a particular country is increasing without its corresponding increase in productivity, it is also going to cause inflation, because we have a lot of people in the country, but the productivity remains the same. And so if the productivity remains the same, it means there is going to be inflation. Producers will increase the price because a lot of people are chasing that particular product. So for example, if 2020 the population of, let's say, Ghana is 1 million, do you get it? And the number of cars in Ghana is also let's say 800. Now in 2022 the population of Ghana is let's say 2 million, but still the productivity or the number of cars we have is 800. We are still producing 800 cars. So you see the number of the population has increased, but the productivity remains the same. So it means those additional 1 million people would also want to drive cars. So they will also use money to chase the fewer cars in the system. And in this case, because they are all putting pressure on those few products, the sellers or the suppliers will then increase the price. I hope you get that. Then the next one is investing in unproductive ventures. And so for the unproductive ventures, we can talk about softwares. Do you get that? So in you investing your money in, let's say, something that will not bring any output, as in software. Do you get it? And at the end you incur loss. You see, anytime a producer incur loss, the producer will then try to punish consumers, because the producer will then add the losses to the commodities, right? And so that is also a way of causing inflation in the system. And lastly, we also have spending on infrastructure that fails to increase output, increase money supply, which is inflation. I hope you get that. And so you are spending. We all know you are spending. You are borrowing. As a government, you are borrowing. You are printing more money into the system. You are spending on infrastructures, and those infrastructures are not increasing, or they are not bringing any outputs. It means there is going to be inflation. And why? Let's take a church for an example. So you see, when governments try to build churches, we know churches will help people spiritually, but churches are not going to produce outputs. It produce output spiritually, but it is not going to produce output when it comes to goods and services, right, in the economy. And so in this case, you see that governments will build many churches. Governments will spend money building many churches, and at the end we still have the few commodities or the product at the market. So you see, there has been a lot of money in the system, but no production has increased. And so that is also another problem. So now let's also look at the cost inflation, the cost push, right? And so when we talk about the cost push, it explains why price levels rises even when the economy is not close to full employment. And so rising cost of factors of production pushes prices up. And so basically, cost push inflation occurs when production cost increase, leading businesses to raise prices to maintain profit margins. And so anytime there is an increase in any factor of production, it means the producer will then add that particular cost to the commodity. And so the price of the commodity has to increase. For example, let's say you are a car manufacturer. you use steel and let's say plastics and all that, and one time you go to the market or you go to a supplier to buy steel, and you see that the price of the steel has increased by, let's say, 10%, because the steel is a factor of production in manufacturing the car. That producer or that manufacturer will buy the steel and will use that steel to manufacture the car. But when he finishes, he's not going to sell the car for that previous price. He will also add the price or the cost incurred, the extra cost incurred, you get, so that he will close the profit margin, because I am earning $200 as a profit whenever I produce one car. And so when I go and the price of the steel has increased, when I come and I finish manufacturing, I don't want my profits to decrease. So what I will do is I will also increase the price so that it will match with my profit margin. That is what we mean by cost push inflation, right? And so let's also look at some of the causes of cost push inflation. And so one is rising price of raw materials. So I think that one we have already explained that. So for example, let's say there is a rise in price of a raw material, or let us use the steel. You get it? Because a steel for manufacturing a car is a raw material. So if the price of the steel increases, it means the price of the car will also increase. I hope you get that. And so it will cause inflation, since inflation is the increase in the general price of a commodity. And also we have rising wages. So rising wages, it's like we are paying workers more wages. I hope you get that. So when we pay them with more wages, it means we also have to increase the price of the commodities in the market. I hope you get it. And so the reason being that for every producer or every entrepreneur, it is the motion that I am producing to make profits. And so anytime I pay or I increase the salaries or the wages of my workers, it means my profit is going to reduce if I don't increase the price. I hope you get that. So they will increase the price of the workers, but they have to add the price or the cost that they have incurred on the new price for that particular product. You get it? So that is basically what we are talking about. So let's also say a union negotiation. Let's say Ghana Teachers Association or any union. You can talk about the transportation or GRTU or any form of union. Let's say they increase the wages of those workers by 10%. Then for the producer, when the producer wants to maintain the profit margins, the factory owner raises the prices of the final product, passing the increased labor cost of the increased labor cost to consumers. I hope you get that. And so that is the rising wages. And so the next is rising indirect tax, right? And so when you increase indirect tax, it will lead to increase in prices, because the producer is let's say the producer is paying more. I hope you get that. And so anytime the producer or the retailers, anytime they pay more, they will also punish the consumers. They will add the price that or the cost that they have incurred on the cost of the material. So suppose I buy a pen for 2 cedis. You get it? And I pay a sale tax of, let's say, 1 cedi. So now the price has become 3 cedis. When I'm going to the market, I'll not sell the pen for 3 cedis, because I want to increase profit. I would have to add 1 cedi or 2 cedis to the pen, which is 3 cedis, to sell it at either 4 cedis or 5 cedis. I hope you get that. Then if they introduce another sale tax on that pen, which I bought it for 3 cedis, I also have to do add another amount to the price of the pen in order to get my profit margin. Then another one is devaluation and what? Depreciation. And so let's say a country currency depreciates against the United States dollar. Do you know that? So making imports more expensive. Anytime your cedi or your naira or let's say any kind of currency depreciates, it means you are going to lose value. Your money is going to lose value. I hope you get that. And so if a retailer is importing smartphones from United States, you see that retailer will raise what? The prices to maintain the profit margin. You get it? And so this price that he is going to raise, it means we, the consumers, those that are going to buy the commodity, are going to bear that particular what cost. I hope you get that. And so that is devaluation or what? Depreciation. That is it. And also imported inflation. Imported inflation. So imported inflation is just like devaluation and what? Depreciation. So I'll just move on to rising transport costs. Rising transport costs. So if there is increase in transportation, it means when the retailers go to the market to buy any products, the cost that they will bear or they will incur for the transportation of those services, it means they would have to add that cost to the price of the commodity. And so you see that the price of the commodity will what? Increase. And so there's another cause towards inflation, right? Then let's look at the effects of the demand, the effect of demand pull inflation and cost push inflation. Okay. And so here we are saying it depends on one, what happens to your earnings, and also two, your what happens to debt, three, what happens to value of assets owned, and four, what inflation is anticipated or not. And so for the earning, that is the first one, we mean if your earning increases at a rate that keeps pace with what? The inflation. So if your earning matches with what? The inflation, you may not feel the effect as much. That is why I said, if the prices of the commodities are increasing, your earning must also what? Increase. Because if your earning increases and the price of the commodities are also increases, here you are not going to feel the inflation. I hope you get that, because your earning and the cost of those goods are what? In line. You get it? And when it comes to debt, here we say the inflation can benefit borrowers with fixed rate debt as the value of the debt decreases over time. Because for lenders or those with variable rate debt, inflation leads to what? Losses. I hope you get that. So we will look at this when in our next slide. And also what happens to the value of the assets. Inflation can affect the value of the assets like real estate, stocks, or bond. So some assets may increase in value during inflation, whilst others may what? Decrease in value during what? Inflation. Did you get it? And also we have what? Whether inflation is anticipated or not. So if inflation is anticipated, individuals and businesses can take steps to control the effects. I hope you get that. So such as either investing in assets that will perform well during inflation period, or they will also adjust what? Pricing strategies. So we are going to look at these things in our next slide as we move on. And so for unanticipated inflation comes as a surprise. Do you get it? And so it means you were not expecting what? The increase in what? Inflation, but it has happened. I hope you get that. Then we also say if inflation was expected to be 10% and turns out to be 15%, there is what? 5% unanticipated what? Inflation. So anticipated is what we expect for, or what we expect the inflation rate to be in the near future. But if there is a change with what we were expecting, it becomes what? Unanticipated. And so problems caused by inflation relates to unanticipated what? Inflation. Now let's look at the unanticipated inflation, the problems that it's caused. Okay, so let's look at it. So the effects when it comes to unanticipation of let's say inflation, one is what? The creditors will lose and the debtors will also what gain. That is when inflation is higher than anticipated. Let's say you have given money to someone and you were expecting let's say a 2% increase in prices of that particular product in the near future. I hope you get that. And you'll be there and you realize there has been what a 7% inflation rates. In this case, you are the one going to incur, or you are the one going to bear the cost, because the time value of the money has decreased. Okay, let's take an example like you lend, let's say, $1,000 at 5% interest to someone. Do you get it? And you were expecting 2% inflation, but you see that the inflation rises to either 4% or let's say 5% increase. There was 5% increase in the inflation, and so you see that the person who borrowed the money from you will pay you the amount that was in the agreement. You get it? But now inflation has happened, and so the money that you were expecting the person to pay to you has now decreased value. You get it? What you can use that money to buy is now less. Or let's do this simple calculation and see. Let's say you have given someone $1,000, right? And this $1,000 that person is supposed to pay the $1,000 to you, and you were expecting, let's say, 2% inflation, right? And so you gave this 1,000% to him, that maybe 2 days time you will take the $1,000, and in 2 days time there is an increase in inflation of, let's say, let's use 10%. There was an increase in inflation of 10%. You gave the person $1,000, and now inflation is 10%. And so multiply the 10% by 1,000, you are going to get $100, right? So it means this $100, because inflation reduced the value of the money, this value of the $1,000 is going to be reduced by the $100, and so you get $1,000 minus $100, which will give you $900 I hope you get that. And so the $900 is not the money the person is going to pay to you. The person will give you the $1,000, but during that time you give the $1,000 to the person, that $1,000 cannot buy what it's used to buy. I hope you get that, because of the inflation, that $1,000 have it has reduced value. I hope you get that. And so the $1,000 you give to the person last 2 days can now buy something that is worth $900 when you are comparing that time. Do you get it? And so that is the reason why we are saying anytime there is inflation, the value of the money or the purchasing power reduces. I hope you get that. And this is towards the debtors, right? And also we say inflation is high than it is when inflation is higher than what we were anticipating. And let's also look at the creditors part. And so for creditors, let's say for creditors, it is when the inflation is lower than what we were expecting. I hope you get that. And so for creditors part, creditors are going to gain, and debtors are also going to lose. I hope you get it. And so let's use the same example for creditors part. Let's say $1,000, you have given $1,000 to someone, right? And the person is supposed to pay that $1,000 in 1 month time. Okay. And let's say in 1 month time, there has been an inflation of 10%, right? They said inflation is lower than expected. So there has been a deflation. So inflation has reduced by 10%. So now if inflation has reduced by 10%, let's calculate 10% of the 1,000. So 10% of the 1,000 give us $100, right? But because the percentage has decreased, or the inflation rate has decreased, we are going to add this $100 to the $1,000. And so if you add the 10% reduction in the inflation, which is the 100 to the 1,000, you are going to get 1,100, right? You are going to get 1,100. And so because there has been deflation or a reduction in the inflation, it means the purchasing power of that money will increase. Do you get it? That is why the purchasing power of $1,000 has increased to 1,100. I hope you get that. And this one, we are saying it favors the creditors, and it does not favors the debtors, because the creditor is going to pay you that $1,000. I hope you get it. According to the agreement, because you gave him $1,000 and you asked him to pay the $1,000, and so the creditor is going to give you the $1,000. I hope you get that. And so instead of the $1,100, I hope you get that. Yes. And so you see that the creditor has gained, because that $1,000 he has given to you is worth let's say 1,100 in the system now. So that creditor who borrowed the money from you was supposed to pay you 1,100 instead of $1,000, right? And so this is what we mean by the anticipation. Okay. And so we also have people on fixed income loose, right? And we have holders of cash loose, and we say forecasting, right? And so people on fixed income loose, let's say your pension, let's use pension, because your pension pays $2,000 a month, but there is an increase in inflation, that is 3% increase in inflation. So you see that your purchasing power will decrease. So have it in mind, anytime there is increase in inflation, your purchasing power will decrease. So you need to adjust, or you need to find a way to maintain your standard of living. I hope you get that. Then also holders of cash loose. So let's say when you hold $10,000 in cash, but inflation rise to 2%, you see that your cash now buy fewer goods and services because it has reduced in value. Do you get it? And forecasting, let's say if also a company struggles, because it is normally companies or managers who does the forecasting, right? So if a company struggles to forecast future production, let's say either production cost or input of production cost due to uncertain inflation rate, it makes it difficult for them to set prices and invest in other projects in order to get income or revenue. So let's move on to sources of inflation. So sources of inflation. One, we are saying deficit financing, that is budget deficit. So when government expense exceeds government revenue, deficit could be financed by printing currency, which is not advisable. I hope you get that. And so the reason we are saying is that anytime the government budget is the value of the budget is greater than the revenue, it means that government has to either borrow or print more money into the system. And we have realized anytime they print money in the system, into the system, it increases the money supply. Do you get it? And whenever there is money supply in the system, there is going to be inflation. Do you get it? And so that is one source of inflation. Then let's look at another source of inflation. That is borrowing from public. And so if you borrow from, as a government, if you borrow from public and you spend it, it means you took the money from the system and it has also been in the system. So there is nothing like inflation, because there is going to be a standardized economy. Do you get it? But when you borrow from the public and let's say that money is less than what you were expecting, do you get it? Here you have to also borrow from the central government, and anytime you borrow from the central government, it means they have to print more money, because it is the central government that prints the money. So anytime you borrow from them, it means you are introducing a new currency into the system. I hope you get it. And so here there is going to be an increase in supply. So if you borrow from the public, have it in mind, we have a standardized economy because there hasn't been any increase in the money supply. But when you borrow from the central government, it means you are adding more money to the one that is existing in the economy. I hope you get that. Then we are saying credit from banks. And so if you borrow from banks, it means producers or wholesalers are now going to spend more, right? They are now going to spend more. And so the more you spend, we have what? Demand pull inflation. Because if I borrow from someone, it means now my purchasing power is what? High, because I have more money. I can spend more money, right? And so that is what we are basically talking about here. And also, we have fiscal policy. And so what about the fiscal policy? You know, from our previous lesson, when we were talking about public finance, that fiscal policy deals with what? How governments raise revenue from taxes and how governments spend those revenue, right? And so anytime you discourage production with what? Taxes, there is going to be what? Inflation. Why? Because when we're treating public finance, we realize because of externalities, the government will impose what? Taxes on, let's say, factories or manufacturing companies that are polluting the air, right? And so when the government imposes taxes on them that they should pay for their pollutants, it means they would have to what? Decrease the level of what? Production. And when production decreases, it means those who are ready to buy the product or the good will be many, and those who are supplying the product, they are going to supply what? A few goods. Do you get it? Assuming a company is producing 100 bags of what? Cement in a year, and now the government has imposed tax on that company because they are polluting the air. So this is going to discourage them, and they are going to produce what? Less. So they will reduce the production to, let's say, 50%, right? Meanwhile, we have 500 people waiting to buy cement. I hope you get that. So it is going to create what? Excess demand whenever you impose tax on factories or any manufacturing company. So that is what we mean by the taxes. And when it comes to spending, anytime you pay huge salaries or wages, we have already looked at that. So if you pay huge salaries or wages for no work done or inefficient work done in the public sector, right? And so anytime you are we know for the public sector, we have public goods like police, we have fire services, we have roads. Do you get it? And so anytime you pay high salaries and there is no efficient work done, do you get it? Here, it means there is going to be what? Inflation, because you are spending more and there is no output. I hope you get that. And we have already looked at that. Anytime you spend more and there is no output, it is what? Inflation. Do you get it? And another one is a decline in what? Economy. That is falling output with a given income level, right? Alternatively, public is unable to lend to what? Government. So if government borrows from bank, it increases money or supply. So if the government borrows from the public, it does not increase money supply, because the money that is circulating in the economy or the system, we have borrowed the money, right? And the government will use the government has borrowed the money, and the government is going to spend the same money in the system. And so there is no inflation. There hasn't been any new money in the system, right? But if there is decline in the economy, we, the consumers or the citizens in the economy, we don't have money, because the economy is very low. We don't have money. So we can't give loan or we can't lend to the government. And so if we can't lend to the government, then the government will be forced to borrow from what? The banks. And so anytime the government borrow from the bank, you know there is going to be increase in money supply, because the government is going for another currency and introduce it to the system. And anytime money is being introduced to the system, there is what? Money supply. That is what we mean here. Okay. And so let's look at other forms of what? Inflation. And so for the other forms of inflation, we have what? Modest inflation, and we have hyperinflation. We also have stagflation. We have suppressed what? Inflation. So let's look at the modest what? Inflation. When we say an economy is in a modest inflation, what does it mean? And so just think about it as let's say you are driving at a safe speed, right? You are driving at a safe speed because a rise in price level considered to be relatively low. So 3%, 3% to 5% increase. I hope you get that. And so you see prices rise slowly. There is a slow increase in what? Price. And that is why we say it is modest, average. And so that is a plus, or it is good for the economy. And so it is better your inflation is what? Modest. And when you talk about what? Hyperinflation, this is when there is high rates of rise in price what? Level. So it could cause people to prefer foreign what? Currency. And so hyperinflation is just like the same driving. You take it as you are speeding out of what? Control, because there is extremely high inflation. And so this percentage is what? Over 100%. Prices rise very fast. That is what we are talking about. Do you get it? And this is very bad for the economy. Hyperinflation is very bad for the economy. And when we talk about the stagflation is just like you are driving slowly in what? A wrong direction. So economy is experiencing both inflation and economic what? Decline or unemployment. The economy is what? Or there is price increase in the economy, right? And the economic development is also what? Decreasing, right? And so this is out of what? Control. Do you get it? And so you see that unemployment is what? High. Price rises, but people have what? No money to even purchase those goods. Because there is decline in the economy, we don't have money to purchase goods. And because there is inflation, prices are rising up. So prices rises as we the consumers, we don't have money to also purchase those how do you call it? Those products or goods. You see that? Yes. And also, let's look at the last one. That is the suppressed what? Inflation. And so this one is just like you are driving with the parking brake what? On. Do you get it? So you see that the inflation is hidden or controlled. Prices are kept low artificially because we can see this kind of economy also can lead to what? Economic what? Problems, because you see that tough policies which prevent price level from rising without taking the inflationary what? Pressures. And so a typical example is China. Do you get it? The government can all those pressures on the inflation. Producers are inflating the prices. There is inflation. You see that the government can just intervene and reduce the prices of the commodities without taking anything into consideration. Do you get it? So that the value of the money will get its power, right? Or it will increase. That is the suppressing what? Inflation. Okay. Then let's look at the reactions during what? Period of inflation. Now, when we talk about the hedge, here we say buying what? Non-money assets whose value either increase or remain the same. So these assets are real estate, stocks, and bonds. You see, these things either increase in price or they increase in value or they remain what? The same, unlike what? Cash. Then also we have what? Efforts to reduce future cost. And so if you know there is going to be future increase in what? Prices, it will be better you buy them now. Do you get it? And so that is what we are talking about when we say efforts to reduce future cost. And also we have efforts for maintaining values of expected income through index what? Linking. Okay. And so the next one is two currencies may what? Emerge together. That is using foreign currency to pay for what? Goods, and saving in foreign what? Currency. And we have capital flights. That is saving in foreign bank accounts, keeping foreign currency, which is converted into cedis or naira or any form of currency when what? Required. Okay, so these are the reactions during period of what? Inflation. Now let's look at the adverse effect of what? Inflation. So for the adverse effect of inflation, we are saying one, it lowers what? Standard of living. That is due to high cost of living, because inflation is the general increase in what? Price of a good or a service. So if the price of commodities or goods are what? Rising, it means there is going to be what? High cost of what? Living, because you need to what? Bear a high cost before you can purchase a commodity, and this high cost of living can also lead to what? A low standard of what? Living. And also the next one is savings, and here we are saying inflation discourages or reduces what? Savings, because if you do not have enough money to even buy commodities or goods, how can you even get what? A money to save in the bank? I hope you get it. And so during the period of inflation, it becomes difficult for people to save. And also the next one is foreign trade. And so for foreign trade, we increase deficits. That is, we import become relatively cheaper than what? Domestic goods, because our purchasing power and the value of our money has what? Decreased or depreciate. Here the money which is what? Superior to our currency has more value than ours. So in other words, buying commodities or product or goods with those superior currencies is far better than you purchasing those goods with what? Your domestic currency. And also we have what? Lending. And so here it either you reduce credit or you increase cost of what? Credits. And we have local currency. And in the period of inflation, there is loss of confidence in the local currency, because there is what? No value, or the purchasing power of the money is what? Less. And so these are the adverse effects of what? Inflation. Now let's move on to the next slide, which is solving demand pull inflation, and we also look at how to solve the cost push inflation. Okay, so solving demand pull inflation. And so the first one is measures to reduce average demand or increase what? Average supply. We know inflation is when the demand is what? Greater than the supply, or the demand exceeds what? Supply, right? So in order to solve this demand pull inflation, you need to find a way to reduce the average demand. Do you get it? Then you try to increase what? Supply. You can increase supply by either subsidizing some of the materials that are used by manufacturing companies, so that they can produce more to match the demand in the market. Okay. Then the second one, we have tight money policy. So the OMO is the open market operation. And so this is to reduce money in circulation and average demand. How? So in this situation, the Bank of Ghana or the Central Bank of US or any central bank is supposed to sell securities, that is bonds or any form of security, to the citizens. Do you get it? At a low interest rate, because they will buy or invest in those bonds, and in order to what? Get profit. So if you want to reduce the, let's say, the liquidity or the money supply in the system, you sell bonds to them, and when they buy the bonds, you get what? The money. I hope you get it. You get those excess money in the system. You get those excess money back. And so that is the open market operations we are talking about. So you see that you reduce the number or the money supply in the system, and so people are not going to spend more on what they are not going to use more money to chase what? Few commodities or goods in order to create what? Inflation. And the next one is tight fiscal what? Policy. And so here we are saying direct tax to reduce what? Disposable what? Income, right? And so here what we do is you see, when the let's say workers or consumers, or when the citizens, there are a lot of money, or when they earn, their income is what? High. It means they have what? They can spend more. I hope you get that. It means they can spend more. And if they have a lot of money and they can spend more, it means they are going to chase what? a few goods. So what you do is you try to increase tax, or you try to impose tax on what disposable income, so that it is going to reduce their income, and this reduction in income will also lead to what less expenditure. Do you get it? And so they are not going to chase goods, because now there is what a reduction in their what disposable income. And also we have what remove production bottlenecks, that is provide input. So you can provide input, and these inputs, some of them are the let's say roads, infrastructures, and this is because when you have good roads, it means drivers are not going to charge more for transportation, and also those that are producing the goods are not also going to charge high, because when the drivers charge or increase the transportation fees, those that are also producing will also increase the fee or the cost or the price of those goods, and it is going to cause inflation. I hope you get that. And the next one is reduce money supply or control excessive public expenditure by reducing waste and embezzlement. And so this one talks about when the government tries to control, the government is supposed to try control the expenditure. Do you get it? So in this case, whenever there is inflation, there must be budget surplus, right? Because when the government try to control the expenditure, it means the revenue will be more than the expenditure, right? So there will be more revenue to settle debts. I hope you get it. And also corruption. So there has to be reduction in corruption or any embezzlement of fund or money in the system. Then remove expenditure on unproductive ventures, investing or spending on unproductive resources or things that are not going to increase outputs. We stop. And the last thing we are going to do is solving cost push inflation. And so solving cost push inflation. Here too, we have controlling union activities by linking wage rise to productivity, right? And so here you see the trade unions, they can increase prices or they can increase let's say wages at any point in time, even if there is inefficient productivity. And so in this case, when you want to solve cost push inflation, you have to link the productivity to the rise in wages. So it has to work this way. If you work harder, it means you will be able to earn high. I hope you get that. And if your productivity is low, there is no way your wage will be high for you to spend more to cause inflation. I hope you get that. Yeah. And one way of also solving cost push inflation is price policy. Price policy. For the price policy, we have the maximum price or the price ceiling or the minimum price, which is the price floor. That one is done by the government. And so when the government realize there is an continuous increase in prices of commodities, the government can intervene and reduce the price to meet equilibrium. And we also have reducing indirect taxes. So reducing indirect taxes, what are some of the indirect taxes we are talking about? That is sale tax, right? Because we've realized if you increase the sale tax, it is also going to cause inflation in the system. So anytime you reduce sale tax, producers are not going to add much to their products to cause inflation. How do you get that? Then we have subsidies towards producers. Subsidies to producers, because that is why I said, let's say if a company is producing cars, you can subsidize, you can give subsidies to producers by either reducing the price of their the steel that they buy or any of their inputs. Do you get it? Because if you reduce, it means they would also have to reduce their prices, which will not cause inflation. And when it comes to technological impact, this one too, we say increase output at lower per unit cost, right? So you are incurring a low cost, but you are increasing high. Then you import from cheaper source. You don't buy from an expensive sources. So you always try to buy from cheaper sources. So this is what we mean by solving cost push inflation. And so this brings us to the end of our lesson for today. That is inflation, right? And so once again, my name is Afari Ernest and welcome to grade A tutorials. Please kindly subscribe to our YouTube channel, like our video, and if you like the video, kindly recommend us at the comment section. Thank you.